Hello and welcome. You are now listening to Canberra Voices.
This episode was produced at the Faculty of Arts and Design at the University of Canberra 2024.
In this episode, we'll be discussing ADFA in Canberra. We acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples,
The original custodians of the Canberra area, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and future.
My name is Kieran. I'll be one of the hosts for today. I am a digital media student at the University of Canberra.
I'm James, I'm the co-host. I'm studying journalism at the University of Canberra.
We are joined today in the studio by our special guest, Matthew Tyo, who is originally from the US but has been living in Australia for around 9 years.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I've been living in Canberra for going on 9 years, going on 10 years actually. Right now I go to university at University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy. I'm also obviously a member of the Australian Defence Force through that. I graduate later this year, and from there I join the Great Wide ADF.
Yes, are you excited for that?
Apprehensive. It'll be my first time properly being a leader, a proper leader, rather than just sort of a pretend leader or a temporary leader. So that's very nervous because you go out into the military and you're suddenly in charge of people who've been doing their jobs for over a decade in some cases, and that's always very terrifying because you're the person who gets to tell them you're on the right track, you're not on the right track, you have to correct this behavior. That's terrifying. Otherwise, it'll be a good change because I've been doing school stuff for almost 2 decades, so.
Bringing it back to you being American, anything you miss about America?
Not really. I've just retained the accent because I could never be bothered to try and learn the Australian accent, but I'm Australian. I wear an Australian flag on my left arm as part of my uniform. I don't really miss that much of America, no.
Do you like Vegemite?
No.
Clearly you're not Australian then.
So comparing between both Australian and American cultures, are there parts of each place you prefer between Australia or America?
I think I left too young to really care about American culture per se. There's not a lot that I would give up in terms of wanting to bring something over from America to Australia in order to, make my life easier or any personal preference like that.
What do you prefer about Australia?
For one, the people. I found it's a lot easier to make friends. That could have just been me being a really, really awkward elementary school kid, but I found it a lot easier to make friends in Australia than I was in the United States. For another, the level of danger. I have actually had my school go into a lockdown when I was in the States because someone got stabbed a couple of streets over, and that person that got stabbed had someone who was attending the school, had a family member who was attending the school I was at the time, whereas I've never had anything remotely similar happen in my time in Australia, except for 3 bomb threats, I think.
I remember those.
You wouldn't remember one of them. One of them happened at ADFA.
Oh, okay.
So, what made you enrolled?
I'd always wanted to do something defense related. I remember when I was really young, I briefly pinged between soldier or police officer. I'd pretty settled into I wanted to join a military by the time I got to university age. My parents moved us to Canberra in 2015 because they got jobs, funnily enough, at University of New South Wales ADFA. I'd been exposed to that institution for a couple of years just by going to my parents where my parents were working in order to have them then transport me somewhere to some extracurricular. So going to ADFA just kind of felt like a logical next step. I wanted to get a university degree and I wanted to join the military, so I may as well go that way. The pathway in the US is also a lot harder because you have to actually go out of your way to get an equivalent of a member of parliament in order to sponsor you, and if you want to go into one of the major officer academies over there.
So did you see or experience any public opinion about the military?
Before joining, not really. Since joining, obviously there was the whole kerfuffle last year where half of ADFA had to get stationed at some point or another at University of Canberra, and I finally got properly sort of introduced into the wider civilian opinions of what the military is like. That was kind of a shock, because up to that point, I'd not really had nothing real negative about the military. Like, obviously, you get all the diverse sort of political opinions on whether or not Iraq 2 was justified or Afghanistan was justified, whether or not we should have pulled out from that, obviously. But I'd never actually heard civilians or potentially recognized that civilians might dislike me because I was wearing the military uniform. So that was a bit of a shock. Other than that, not really.
And you were put in the University of Canberra dorms because of black mold, is that correct?
A mix. Black mold, one of the buildings, the roof fell off, and it was discovered there was asbestos, but yeah.
The roof fell off?
Yeah, one of the internal roofs sort of just collapsed during that leave period. It was turned out that there was asbestos in the roof as well. But yeah, a bunch of the live-in accommodation at ADFA had mold problems. Like, you can find anecdotes going back to pretty much a couple of years after construction was finished in the 80s, but it got really concerning, and buildings started getting condemned and unlivable status being issued out in 2018. And they finally started there is a big problem, we need to do major renovations last year. They finished those renovations up at the end of 2022, so we're all back on base, but they're just tearing all the old buildings out and constructing new buildings over the course of the next few years. I think they plan to break ground around New Year's this year, destroy the first set of buildings, start building new buildings. I think that the way they're planning on doing that rebuild, there's going to be a gap where there's going to be people that they can't house, although I don't think it's enough to justify another Camp UC. I think they're just hoping people rent.
Do you get any assignments or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. The University of New South Wales is an actual civilian university that is just contracted by the military to do our education. So they'll do standard university assignments for us, essays, take-homes, group projects. I do majority essays or essay-related stuff just as the nature of my degree, because it's a humanities degree. But your engineers, they just sit bulk quizzes, bulk tests, labs, all that kind of thing. The military side as well, they used to do quizzes. That changed about the time I joined. You do one essay at your first semester for a military assessment. It's what we call a silent mentor, where you just get issued a soldier or other service member who previously served and more than likely gave their life as part of their duties, and you just have to look at them and see if you can take anything away from their story, basically. After that, we start doing more military-style briefs, start practicing those, because our understanding is that that's a lot of the job, is just briefing superiors on various topics, whatever they want you to brief you on. So you get practice on that as part of the military. Then there's also a lot of drill. We do a lot of military drill.
You go out into the field every now and then. What's that like?
The field that we do, so the priority at ADFA is the academic degree. That's what you're there to do. And also get your initial military training as a corps officer, unless you're in the Navy where you technically already have that. So we don't actually do a lot of the field during the actual academic year, which is blocks of about 6 to 8 weeks through the year. But during our leave periods, except for the Christmas, New Year's leave period, you're either on leave, which the Air Force gets a lot of leave, but for the Army and the Navy to a lesser degree, they issue you your single service training then. So for the Army, you'll go to Kapuka. You'll do that for a month, where you'll learn the basic skills of, essentially you get your rifle qualification. You'll be qualified to be able to handle a rifle up to about 300 meters. And then you'll learn the basics of your minor infantry tactics as a rifleman, as a general enlisted soldier, basically. That lasts about a month. Then the next major training block is what's known as 2 Charlie. That's the middle of second year, the June-July leave period. You go out to the Majura training range, which there's a range a bit north of the airport, and you spend 2 weeks getting the real basic introduction to being a section commander. You don't get assessed for that field phase. It's just an introduction on what it's like, how to write orders, how to deliver orders, and what kind of QDEs you can expect, quick decision exercises. You'll also get a little bit of training on some of the more niche things you'll do as a section, like how to detain someone, how to detain a prisoner prisoner of war, how to do first aid under fire, that sort of thing. During the fall and autumn leave breaks, you'll also get a week where you're exposed to one of the proper military brigades. That's varied over the course of ADFA. Like, it also varies period to period because they can't consistently nail down a brigade where they can send us to. I went to the one that's in Adelaide at the moment. Most people go to one of the ones in Townsville or Darwin. You just get a week where you get to interact with lieutenants, just see what life in a unit is like. And you'll also get qualified on the high explosive weapons, your claymores, 66mm M72 laws. I think we just call them 66s, so I'm not sure what the actual designation is. Then your next big field phase is at the start of third year. That's the one that I've done in January. It's your first proper assessment of how to be a section commander. You're basically rehashing 2 Charlie, except with less guidance from staff, and it's also longer and more intense, whereas 2 Charlie is probably about a week at most of actual time in the field. 3 Alpha, you're in the field for the entire, 3 weeks you're out there. And then same for 3 Delta, which is the one I'll do at the end of the year. And that one is the proper, this is your assessment. You need to pass this, or at least you need to pass one of these leads before we will allow you to march over to Duntroon and start properly learning how to be a lieutenant. So you'll get 0 help from staff at all and just a lot more pressure. But it's pretty much the same actual stuff that you're doing.
Okay.
I want to ask, despite all your training, how did you balance that in your education? Do you have free time in your hands?
Compared to other military academies, ADFA gives you a lot of free time. We're only really required from 8 till 1600 every day to actually do our education. You put in more time if you have to. The engineers are really bad for just having to consume their entire lives doing their academic stuff, although I think that's kind of just a trend outside.
That's just engineers in general.
Yeah. The military side doesn't eat a whole lot if you don't want it to. Ultimately, you are just learning the basics of being an officer at ADFA. They're just trying to develop your leadership. They're not actually trying to turn you into a qualified initial officer for your job role. A lot of that has to get handled by IETs, or initial employment training, or your equivalent, in order to make sure that your trade-specific knowledge is up to scuff. And in the case of Army and in the case of Navy, they also get a lot of their military education outside of ADFA. Navy does what's known as NEOC. I don't remember what that stands for, but basically they have 6 months where they're getting their training, and then they get 6 months actually out in the fleet before they come to the Australian Defence Force Academy. And Army, we get 8 months after we graduate ADFA learning how to be lieutenants at Royal Military College at Duntroon.
Any observations about the military culture you've kind of found yourself in?
One of the things you'll hear a lot from the staff at ADFA, because all the staff at ADFA have been in the military for an extended period of time before they either come back to ADFA or go to ADFA as staff. ADFA is not the wider military. You get a lot of really close-knit, bigger groups than you would think, because the way that ADFA, especially training institutions, are run, or everybody lives in close-knit quarters. 4 people share a bathroom, the way that ADFA is set up at the moment, and a division of up to 46 people will share a kitchenette and a living space together. So you get a lot of really big groups that are close together than you'd get elsewhere, unless you're like me and you live off for whatever reason, which is pretty rare at ADFA. You live with the people you work with. We try to espouse, keep a good work-life separation. There are a lot of people in the military you'll find that just don't agree with that sentiment. You're in this situation, your work is just going to bleed into your life for whatever reason, because you're technically on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You may as well just embrace that. Have your friendship groups be in the military. Keep those in-jokes. If and when you do make friends with the civilians, don't try to keep them separated from your military friends, because sometimes just having those 2 different cultures mixed together, that can just be a lot of fun. Other than that, there's a bit of intensity to military culture, because you'll get really competitive groups, especially in for example, Army at ADFA, where we all know that once we march over the hill to Duntroon, we're going to get ranked against each other in the order of merit in order to determine what our job is going to be in the military and whether we get the job that we want. So there is a lot of intensity, competition to be the best, especially at the sort of military skills, shooting, pack marching. A lot of guys that love lifting weights too. That's a very big thing in the military. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of difference that I've experienced. Mind you, this could also just be because it's the Australian Defence Force Academy. It's nothing like what an actual unit, be it Army, Navy, or Air Forces, is like. Navy people, when you're on a ship, it's the same problems at ADFA, but even worse, because at ADFA, you at least get a room, and you get walls separating you and where you sleep from the other people. And on a ship, you're lucky if you have only one roommate. And then work is also just substantially different for Air Force and Army people as well. So those are pretty much the only real differences I've experienced in my time at the military.
You've interacted with people that have been from the military proper. What are they like, in your opinion?
In my experience, very intimidating, because usually those people are like your direct superior or your superior's superior, just because that's just the way that ADFA is. Like, the only people who really return to ADFA are people who want to be training the trainees, so that's pretty much the only lens you really interact with them. You'll also get, like, a lot of variability, a surprising amount of variability. You'll get the people that only refer to you by your rank, because that's technically the way that you're supposed to be referred to as a trainee. You're supposed to just be, in my case, Officer Cadet Tyo. You'll also get the people who are laid back and just who do want to treat you as human beings, because ultimately, once you leave ADFA, that's kind of the person they want to see. They don't want to see the guy with a stick up their ass, just constantly referring to people by their titles. They do want people that are somewhat personable. You do have to be able to take that step back, and you don't want to be like super close friends with your subordinates, because you do have to discipline them when they are stepping out of line. But you also just don't want to be that robotic guy that sometimes shows up, delivers them an order, and then leaves. You do want to have some personal interaction with them.
Yep. And I think that's all we have time for, so
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
No problems. Thank you very much for having me.